Yeah, last week it just froze.
Check and make sure we're getting sound.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Hold on. I gotta get there. All right, go ahead.
All right, testing 1, 2, 3. Does it look like we have sound?
Yep. You got sound.
Right.
You're good. You are live.
We are live, huh? All right. Well, welcome to Grace Baptist Church Adult 1 Bible Study. My name is Norm Mills, and you're watching this because of the excellent technical help of former Pastor Lee Heeman, and I'm glad you're with us today. And I apologize for last week. Those of you who watch online, unfortunately, something went bad. It just picture froze and didn't go any further. But hopefully this week it'll be just fine. So glad to have you with us. Get your Bibles ready. John chapter 5. John chapter 5.
Thank you.
And today we're going to be looking at a miracle at the pool of Bethesda. Now, that's a hard word for me to say because I keep trying to say a different word.
I always thought it was Bethesda.
Well, that's correct. Bethesda. I said it wrong. So there's a town that's similar sounding, and my see where it is here. Well, trust me, there is a town like that. I can't see it right now on the map. But there's a town similar named like that, but it's definitely Bethesda is correct, and Bethesda, you got to pronounce the middle syllable there, is a familiar sounding name to some people because there's a big hospital near Washington D.C. I think it's a naval hospital. I'm not sure, and that's where a lot of our military members end up going to when they get hurt, and they go to Bethesda, and I think that's also where the president goes. Whoever the president is at the time, for his medical stuff. Very, very well-known, nationally known, probably world-known medical facility. But anyway, we'll talk about the connection between that. By the way, there's other hospitals named Bethesda. I looked it up. There's several other hospitals, but that's the main one we think about when we hear it. But we'll talk about that connection also when we get into our study today. It's called Pick Up Your Mat. Pick Up Your Mat is the title today for our study. And like I said, we're in John chapter 5. So please have your Bibles ready to that particular place. And let me see, got all my notes in a row here. We're going to be looking at these main points in chapter 5 of John, verses 5 through 16. I'll probably read the ones before that because it's a good introduction for the main verses. But these are the main points. We're going to talk about compassion expressed, that's point 1, and that's verses 5 through 9a. And then the second point is legalism exposed, and that's going to be verses 9b through 13. And the third point is identity exposed, and that's going to be verses 14 through 16. So let's buckle up and we'll get going here. Let's open with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for these words that you gave us, Lord, to be able to read, to ponder, to learn from, to adjust our hearts and lives to, Lord. And I just pray that these words will strike a chord within our own hearts, Lord, and help us to understand these things. Just pray to be with those that are not here with us today. Those maybe that are on their way here, those that are sick, and thank you for those that are watching online. And I just pray that you bless this study for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. So, let's see. What is the difference, do you think, between pity and compassion? Pity and compassion. Now I remember, who was it? Mr. T, he'd say, "Pity the fool." Remember the A-Team guy?
Yes.
Right. Mr. T. We're not talking about that kind of offhand remark. We're talking about actual pity and actual compassion, of course. But what do you think would be the difference between them? And can they be expressed together? in a single unit,
Yes,
perhaps?
yes. I think compassion is more relatable to the person who
Okay.
is doling out the compassion or the pity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they can relate to what's going on. Maybe it's happened to them. Maybe it's something
Right.
similar.
Okay.
Pity can be condescending.
Yeah, that's true. Can you do me a favor? Go ahead and close the door. I heard a little bit of noise coming down the hallway there. It's a little distracting for me. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, those darn kids.
Well, no, I didn't say darn. It's those lively kids. To me, pity is more of almost an inward thing. Well, I sure pity that person that's homeless there in the street begging for food, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas compassion is more outward. Because you're expressing an action, maybe. And I had time to think about it, that's why I sprung it on you guys, and I don't feel that you're not worthy to consider these things. That's not true, but I'm studying it more, so I kind of had some deep thoughts about it, I guess. But compassion is something that your heart melts towards an action. Now, I don't know if that's a correct definition, but that's what I came up with. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like more of a connection to the person or
Yeah.
whatever you have compassion for versus pity is like standoffish a little bit.
But we can have those two together, expressed in a single thought towards somebody, because we're going to see that in the scriptures here, right? So you can have that pity, which is that more of an inward thing. Well, I sure pity that person, to promote you or push you towards a compassionate action. Anyway, I had something I was going to read on that. Where was it? Ah, here we go. I think this is also the introduction paragraph in the book, but it's in my Bible commentary notes too. Pity usually involves our response to a situation. Okay, that makes sense. We define a person by what he or she is experiencing. Compassion usually involves our actual response to that person. Like I kind of said, it has an action involved, right? We define the experience by how the person is impacted. That makes sense as well. Compassion tends to move us toward acting because our focus is on the person and not the situation. We see Jesus showing both pity and compassion as he interacted with the unnamed lame man. So, I think it can be definitely beneficial to have both actions in our life. To pity a person, but not just leave it there, because pity is incomplete. You know, be moved to compassion too. Jesus was, right? So today's study, we're going to see how Jesus showed both pity and compassion, how he interacted with a disabled man, and we'll think about how Jesus showed compassion also to you, and how he calls you to show compassion to others. So that's our goal today. In these verses. And we don't know what the disability was this man had. Some translations call him an invalid. Some, I think, maybe refer to him as being a lame person or paralyzed person, maybe. I can't remember. I didn't go through all the different verses on that. But this person had a problem. And this person was mobility. We know that. And he had this problem, we're going to see, for 38 years. You know, after about 5 years or more, if you had this kind of a problem, you couldn't get up and walk. What would you think?
I've done something, well, I don't know.
Well, that's further, but I mean, what would you think about your physical situation, though?
Hopeless.
That's hopeless. That's the word I was looking for. It's no more hope. It's been this many years. Doctors have tried everything. I've tried everything. You're at the end of your rope. You know, you see the advertisements on TV for the copper fit thing, and you're going to try that. You know, and you start grasping, right, for straws. So that's where this man was. Beyond 5 years, beyond 10 years, beyond 20 years, beyond 38 years. Now, it doesn't say he was this way from birth. It's kind of the insinuation that he was obviously that way for the majority of his life. So if I were guessing, I would say probably as a child, this malady, this sickness, this lameness, whatever it was you want to call it, probably struck him at that time, early in his life. And so for almost all of his life that he can think back, because remember, people didn't live much longer than about 40, 50 years back then. Now, some people did live further, but for the majority of people didn't, because, it was a tough life, physical life. And there was nothing like the medical things we have today. So this person probably had most of his life, he's at the end of his life, he was without hope. So he's grasping for straws, right? There we go. Why do I have a problem with that word? I want to say the other word so badly. But this place here was a interesting thing to refer to here, and let me think. Okay, it was in the lesson book actually. And page 65 talks a little bit about that as well, under understand the context, and it's interesting. You know, in order to know what they're talking about, sometimes you have to go back to history. I like history. I don't know, anybody here like history? I do. I like to know why things are the way they are today. Well, Jerusalem's only natural source of water. Now, water we talked about last week is what? Really important? Yes, very important. Remember that? Very important. But the water supply was the Gihon Spring, it's called. And it flows east of the city of David. Water from the spring collects in these underground caves. And beyond these, people also dug these huge, giant cisterns. Cistern is basically a container. Think of it as a giant bowl underground to collect rainwater. And they'd actually dig into the bedrock because, well, that's the best way to hold water. I mean, you got either dirt or rock, solid rock. Which would you choose? Solid rock. Because you've seen, they even make things like sinks out of marble, which is essentially the same idea. So they would contain this rainwater that way, they collect it. Let's see. After the Babylon captivity, when the people came back and they rebuilt things, they built also, along with those things, these large open air pools. And they served as water reservoirs for the city's growing population. In Portland, there is or was a large pool of water they used for part of Portland's water system. And every once in a while, somebody would do something stupid. And I'm not going to go into detail, but they got videotape of people doing stupid things up there. And they'd have to shut the water down, they'd have to clean this process, and because it was open air. And they were talking about actually enclosing it, some sort of a roof thing, because it's fed by streams or something, I guess, or little creeks. But so this is a common thing is what I'm getting at. This is not an unusual thing, it's a common thing.
And it makes the news every time
it
it happens.
It does indeed. And there's birds that die and fall into it, and you never see that, but I want to go into it.
Yeah.
They do treat it well with chemicals, so don't worry if you ever drink that water. Although, a little digression here. I worked for a long time at the Portland International Airport on the other side where the military base is. You may or may not know there's a military base there. It's a guard base. I was part of the reserves, and I never drank the water there. It had a metallic, fishy taste to it. It was terrible. That's just I'm sorry if you live in Portland. I have pity and compassion for you. Well, I have pity.
So the bottled water Dasani
Yes.
comes from the Willamette.
Oh no!
It gets treated. It gets treated.
We don't even talk about the Willamette and what happens there.
Never drinking that again.
Maybe it's
Sorry.
Which part of the Willamette?
I was gonna say maybe it's
I have
further.
no clue.
Maybe it's further upstream. They had water.
Way upstream.
I
hope
still
so.
don't drink this anymore.
Anyway, we digress here, so let's go back on focus. So they had these large open air pools, okay? And so one of them was the pool of that place. Bethesda, there we go. I knew I was going to mess it up. And it was located north of Temple Mount near something called the Sheep Gate, okay? And this pool, it offered a place of refuge from the heat. You know, there's a cooling place. The people would come there. People traveling through would stop there, get a drink, fill up their water pots, things like that, right? And it was a neat, interesting place apparently. But they would have travelers that would come there and would stop and rest. But also they had the chronically ill, it says, and injured people that would gather around this pool. Now, why was that? Because periodically the water would ripple like that. And so there was a custom or tradition or whatever you want to call it that indicated an invisible angel coming down and stirring the water. And so the idea was if this angel was doing this, if you get in the water really quick, again, they're drinking water here, but anyway, you get in the water real quick and you're an injured person, you got leprosy, you got whatever, which would be a bad thing too, you would be healed. And that's an interesting thing. And I didn't know this, where did I read that? Okay. oh yeah, here it
Page
is.
65
Yeah,
down there.
I got this one part in page 65. Jews and non-Jews alike believe this, by the way. The water had this healing power. Non-Jews saw it as a healing sanctuary. They attributed its power to Eshmum, a Semitic god of healing. And so, did the Jews believe this initially, or did the Jews just start believing what this non-Jew tradition was? We don't know. We don't know. But obviously, it was sort of a capricious thing, and people today look at it, and the people that study the Bible and stuff believe it was a natural upbringing of water happening. So they believed that the angel would stir the water on occasion. The first person to enter the pool would be healed. It's like a contest. There it goes. Let's go. And whoever goes in there.
Driven.
Yeah. So this man was waiting there. He was waiting there, but he had a problem. He couldn't go at all. He was hoping that somebody would help him into the water. No one would help him. No one would help him. So that's the backdrop on these our thing today. So I'm going to read the full text, which talks a little bit about that as well. After these things is verses 1 through 4. After these things, whatever happened in the previous chapter 4, we talked about that last week. There was a feast of the Jews. It didn't say which feast, by the way, just a feast of the Jews. They had a lot of them. And Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda. I said it right. And it had 5 porticos. Now, that's just a fancy name for like porch areas. Okay? It's around this pool, little places you could gather and
sunbathe.
And whatever. I don't know if there's sunbathing there. But
Soak your toes.
Yes.
anyway, it was for the convenience of the people. Travelers and such coming through like we talked about. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, and withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then was first after the stirring of the water stepped in and was made well from whatever disease with which he was afflicted. Now John is saying these things because he's indicating this is what people thought. He's not saying it as an absolute truth here. He's recounting this as something that people did. Okay, keep that in mind. So that's our backdrop to what we're going to be talking about today. And I want to bring out the fact that this is one of the 7 signs of John's Gospel that the writer of this particular session has brought out. And I think I have a poster somewhere. There it is. We talked about the changing of water to wine. And then last week we talked about healing of the official son. This is in chapter 4. And this week we're on healing of the invalid at Bethsaida. Bethsaida. There we go. I can't say it today. I give up. Anyway, so the main idea, of course, is that Jesus is Lord over all creation and values all people. I got that our statement right there, right? And so we want to remember that as we go through this study today. Let's go ahead and read these verses. I forgot to ask who wants to read. See, you guys got to help me on this. See, she's coming and saying, do you have any verses for me, Norm? I said, yeah, I got a verse for you. There you go.
Do you have any verses for us?
I
Norm?
do. Would you like to read? Would you like to read a verse?
Yeah, I'll read a verse.
Okay, I'm sorry, Steve. Out of luck.
Well, he's really upset.
Oh, boo-hoo.
That's okay.
Yeah,
We'll let
you
it
can
go.
pity
So-
me
so-
and have compassion.
Moving along here. We pity you.
I'm kidding myself.
For these first 4.5 verses, I want you to take note of Jesus' question and how the disabled man responded, okay? What was his question and how did he respond? Okay, so go ahead and read that verse.
John 5, 5 through 9a. A man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that he had already been a long time in that condition. He said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Pick up your pallet and walk." Immediately the man became well and picked up his pallet and began to walk.
So this is another one of the miracles that Christ performed. One of the attesting signs, as they call it, okay? And there's reasons for why he did all these things, obviously. But here he comes past this pool. And just coincidentally he sees these people. Just coincidentally he sees this one person, right? No. Nothing's coincidental here. This is planned. Jesus knows this man already. Remember, we talked about that already. How he knew Nathaniel, how he knew, yes, last week's lesson, I can't remember what the guy's name was. Anyway, but he knows these things, right? He understands these things. And so John's telling us that, he's filling in the details for us. It says, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time in that condition. Think about those words right there. Jesus knew this man's heart, his life. You think Jesus knows ours as well? Think we can hide anything from him? No, we can't,
Although we
right?
think
We try, don't we? We try to fool ourselves sometimes, in many ways, right? But he asks a question. What is that question he asks him?
Do you want to get well?
Do you wish to get well? Now here he knows this man has been sick for 38 years. He knows that this man feels hopeless. He has no hope. He's just ready to die almost at that point. This is his last gasp for getting healed. And he can't get into the water. And he is as hopeless could be. And Jesus asks him, do you wish to get well? What if you were putting yourself in that man's condition, what would you maybe think about or say if Jesus asked you that question?
Yeah.
Duh! Right? But no, this man, he said, what? Sir? Now, sir is just a way of like we would say, we say sir too.
Hey, you.
No, it's kind of a semi-formal way of addressing
Yes.
It's
somebody.
honorific.
There's the word I was looking for. He says, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water stirred up. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me. Okay, now you need to be aware of something here. Does this man know who Jesus is?
No.
No clue. He has no clue. So he doesn't know he's talking to Messiah. He has no clue this is a rabbi. He has no clue that he's already performed miracles. So just keep that in mind, okay? He says, I have no one to do that, right? And another one steps down before me. So what is he basically doing here? What is he saying? If you heard somebody saying something similar to this, what would you think about that person's words?
Could you put me in the pool?
Yeah, well, that's true, yeah. But he's complaining, he's bemoaning, right?
Yeah.
Just poor me. This is the way I am, I can't fix this. He says, I'd love to get well, but no one can help me get in the pool. By the time it's stirred up, and I tried to move out of my pallet, too late. I can't do it. So
He might have not been totally whining. Those were the facts.
yeah, well, those were the facts. He was kind of bemoaning, if you look at the
Yeah, yes.
bemoaning
yes,
a little bit. But yeah, that was the situation. Remember, he's hopeless.
Yes.
If you were hopeless, how would you respond? Any differently, you think?
A little sarcastic, maybe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That the response you did? You mean?
No, what I would do.
Oh, what you would do? Oh!
Yeah.
I was giving you the benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, maybe, right? If you remember some of the previous stuff that we know about here, Jesus healed a man born blind. Remember that? Born blind. That was amazing. He also healed a woman who had a blood disease for 12 years. You think she was probably feeling hopeless about her situation too? Yep. The man born blind, I'll never see. He also healed the man in this story who had lived for 39 years, 38 years, whatever it was. I think it was 38. Well, it says 38 here. Perhaps Jesus chose him because he had been lame for so long. Since doctors could do nothing for him, God the Son chose to intervene. And again, it wasn't like he just happened upon him. This was a divine appointment. This is Jesus saying, this man here is going to reveal God's glory. It's going to be an interesting story here. Anyway, so what did he say to the man? We heard what the man said, right? I got no one to help me. I can't get healed. And Jesus told him what?
Pick up your pallet and walk.
Get up, pick up your pallet, and walk. Now, an interesting thing here, whenever we've seen Jesus say a word of command, what do you see happen?
It gets done.
It gets done.
Right away.
It gets done?
Yeah.
So, this man would have no hope, and yet he felt suddenly like he could do what this man just said. He doesn't know who this guy is. And he gets up. It says immediately the man became well. Now, I've been hurt at various times in my life. Right now, my knee right here has been bothering really bad. You know, and as it starts to feel better, I know it's better. You know, I can feel, oh wow, I can stand up without pushing myself up now. Oh my goodness, you know. So do you think he had that feeling of suddenly I'm better?
Yeah.
Indeed he did, yeah. Now, if somebody has not been able to walk, just bedbound for, I don't know, let's just say 1 year, can they, when they finally, their limbs feel better, can they stand up and walk around and pick up stuff and do things?
No, the muscles are shot.
No, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. There's a word called entropy. Or is it atrophy?
Atrophy.
There is a word called entropy, but I'm using it wrong. Your limbs atrophy when they're not used. That's a fancy $10 word for they become weak. The muscle tone is gone. As a matter of fact, sometimes the time frame for you to get your muscle tissues back and everything exceeds the actual time it takes to heal. People who've had surgery, the surgery didn't take very long and healed up within about 6 weeks. Meanwhile, 6 months later, they're still going through rehab. You know, so we can see the issue. What does this man do though?
He just gets up.
He stands up.
He just does what?
He picks up the mat and walks away. Think about that. The impact. What does that mean? How is the healing done?
Supernaturally.
Supernaturally, yeah. When like I said, when somebody does get healed in a normal hospital, this doesn't happen. So this means this person's bones, his ligaments, his tendons, his muscles were what?
Totally healed.
Totally healed. Not only that, I think they're recreated in a sense.
Yeah, quite possible.
And not just that, up here. Because you have to teach your legs to do those things again.
Yeah.
Walking, does a child when they're born walk?
It takes a while.
No, the brain has to know how to do that and get coordinated and walk. This guy didn't stumble and fall several times. He got up and walked. So think about this. Somebody spoke to this man. His body was healed suddenly, and his brain was rewired so that he could do all these things. Who could do that?
Christ.
The Lord of creation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lord of creation. That's an interesting thought. And most people just go right past that part of it. But if you think about that, that's the hardest part. The hardest part. So this is showing. This is explaining a little bit of our main idea here, that Jesus is Lord over all creation, and He values all people too as well. But we see this connection here, and between the main idea that we're talking about, right, and this man, his ability, Jesus' ability to heal, in his role as Lord over all creation. It talks about in Scripture where Jesus was in the first part of John, the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was Christ, and the Christ was with Him in creation. Okay, He wasn't part of creation; He was the creating force. Jesus, without Jesus, nothing was created. And He's demonstrating this with this miracle. This is the Lord of all doing what God the Father did in creation in Genesis. He's doing it here right in this man.
Where is the phrase in John, and I don't know what to look for in the concordance, that everything was made by Him, for Him, and through Him?
It might be in the first chapter, but I'm not sure. I have to look it up. I'll look it up and find you. Okay, find it for you. But it might be in the first chapter. Did you read through the first chapter already?
I read, but I thought, well, maybe I could have overlooked it. I was thinking maybe it was in the other Johns, that,
John's other letters?
yeah.
Yeah, it could be there too.
So-
I'll find it for you later, but I can't, right now
That's fine.
I don't have it tip my tongue.
Where's Matthew when we need him?
I know, now he would know.
Sitting
Matthew,
right there.
where are you? Anyway, that's a good question though. But it's interesting to see he values all people. He did not go to the king to fix his sore toe. He went to this man, and we don't even know if this man was a Jewish person. We don't really know that.
It doesn't matter.
I should rephrase that. We do know he was, because he went to the temple. Then they threatened to throw him out
of the temple.
of the synagogue or
Yeah.
temple because of this healing, by the way. We see later on.
Through the man. Oh,
Yeah, so he was a Jew. There's no doubt about that. But he was also considered unclean because of his affliction, by the way, which is why he couldn't ever go to the temple, because of when you're afflicted with any kind of disease, you're considered unclean. You cannot go. That was the way they looked at it. But Jesus went to him. That's the key here. Jesus went to him. He was helpless, he was needy, and Jesus went to him. He wasn't rich, he wasn't influential. So, question for you. Do you think the man's actions, not his words, but his actions were a statement of faith?
Yes.
What was his actions again?
Got up and walked.
And it didn't say after a little bit. It didn't say, well, maybe I'll try it out a few times, flex it a little bit, get some food first. It says immediately. Immediately he did. So, yeah, that was a statement of faith, wasn't it? And I think he felt the fact that things were new, things were strong, and his mind says, you can do this, get up and do it. And it's just amazing if you think about it. But anyway, he chose to go to those kind of people. And that was a statement of faith on his own. Here we see how obedience to Jesus showed faith, while disobedience points to a lack of faith. The man's faith in Jesus allowed him to do something he had never done before, as far as we know about this man. Jesus healed the man because he was willing to literally take a step of faith. He stepped up and moved, right? He took that step of faith. But in the middle of the most important moment of his life, this man faced some interesting opposition now from a group that you'd never think would oppose something like this. This group was more concerned with holding their own power than in celebrating the power that had just liberated this man's physical life.
They were threatened.
Yes, we're going to see about that here now. So let's look at the next part. This is, I forgot to mention one important thing here. This was the Sabbath, the seventh day this happened. We're going to see about that now. So let's read John 5, 9b through 13. And 9b starts on, I think, now it was the Sabbath day. Go ahead.
Now it was the Sabbath on that day. So the Jews were saying to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not permissible for you to carry your pallet." But he answered them, "He who made me well was the one who said to me, 'Pick up your pallet and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Pick up your pallet and walk'?" But the man who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away while they were in the while there was a crowd in that place.
So this is very interesting again. I love these verses. But just that last part, Jesus was able to slip away from the crowd. So that tells you something about Jesus and his physical appearance. What was it, you think? Special?
He was common.
Was he a head and shoulders above everybody else? Did he have that wonderful face that you see in all the portraits that the European masters would? No. He looked like an ordinary, regular Jewish person. He was able to slip away. Kind of interesting. But anyway, the first point was what? It was what?
The Sabbath.
The Sabbath day. Now, what is the Sabbath day? Sometimes there's some confusion about that. And I made a little point paper, if you want to call it that. If you look at your handout on the second page of handout 1, and I got it right here. Yes, there it is. And I made a little thing that says, "What is the Sabbath?" And I got this from several sources, including some commentaries and such. But the word Sabbath means a day of rest. That's what it means. It was considered holy to God by his resting on the seventh day after creating the world and humankind. Now I got a question right here at the back. When is it that an all-powerful person needs to rest?
They shouldn't need to.
Doesn't need to rest. Yeah. Doesn't need to rest. But this is a symbol for us to observe and see, basically, showing just keep that in mind as we go through here, right? It also can mean certain things like to desist and cease. I think that's somewhere else, I guess. I thought I wrote that there. Yes, that's what I think I'm reading the same thing. Hold on. Yeah. Let me make sure.
Oh, it was on your second page under Sabbath, or I was
Yeah.
because I didn't know some of these things. That it meant cease and desist. That's kind
There it is. Yeah. Oh, there. Okay, I do have that there. Ha!
On
I didn't
page
read it.
127, there's
Yes.
a list of all of the first century laws. And
We're gonna.
oh, we're gonna talk about it. It's like
Keep your finger there. I might ask you to read some of those for us, okay? But we'll talk about that in just a second. We're gonna get to that. The Old Testament. In the Old Testament, the word comes to a Hebrew word called, and I'm going to butcher this, probably Shabbat, meaning to cease or to desist. Now that's not what the Sabbath itself means, but it came from that. The main meaning is the cessation from all work. Now, when this was written in the Old Testament days, it meant those things that you do for livelihood, primarily, okay? That's what it's referring to. Those things that require physical effort to do. You were allowed to, if your animal fell into a pit, to get your animal out of the pit. Okay, they made exceptions on this because I think they knew that later on people were going to mess this up.
Right.
But anyway, there are certain things you were allowed to do that and were enumerated. But we're not going to get into all that part. But for the most part, there wasn't that many things listed. And so when they started making the extra rules, you're going to hear about this in a moment. They filled in all kinds of interesting things. What was this statement about the Sabbath? It was part of the Ten Commandments. Does that have a lot of authority?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it does. Yeah. It was actually the fourth commandment, I believe. And it says that God rested on the seventh day after creation, thereby making that day holy. See in Exodus 20, verses 8 to 11, it talks about that. And the second point, and this was an interesting one, it doesn't get much press, if you will, Israel's redemption from slavery in Egypt. If you read in Deuteronomy 5, 12 through 15, it talks about that. And you guys can read that on your own. These two reasons made the Sabbath also a time to celebrate what God had done. It was very much a time of sacred assembly and worship. Leviticus 23 talks about that. And it was a token of their covenant, Jews' covenant with God. Death was the penalty for desecration of the Sabbath. And desecration is an interesting word. It means not only to go against the law, but to do it in a callous, disregarding way. You know, like if in the temple, I forgot the guy's name. There was a Roman ruler, I believe it was, or maybe it was some other. But anyway, he set up a idol in the temple to desecrate it, and he had a pig sacrificed on the temple in Jerusalem.
Antiochus Epiphanes.
Yes, that's it. Very famous thing, and that's the abomination of desolation, it's referred to as. But anyway, so that was a desecration. That word is used for that all the time. So that's what they're talking about, that kind of callous disregard for that, right? So during the time between the Old and New Testaments, the Sabbath became the heart of the law at that time. You would think it would have been the first commandment, but it wasn't. It was the fourth commandment. And the prohibitions were greatly expanded, and there was 39 specific tasks that were banned. For example, you could not tie or untie a knot.
If it required both hands.
There's all kinds of.
You could do with one hand.
Yeah, and I'm going to have you write down just a second. These in turn were further expanded upon and devised, which caused the spirit of the commandment to be lost, but seemed to satisfy, technically speaking, the legal requirements. Now, there's many more things that are very interesting. I'm going to go ahead and read some of those for me now.
Okay, so the knot thing. Untying a knot was forbidden if it required both hands.
I don't know how you're going to tie it up without the other hand. But.
One could drink only the amount of wine equal to 3/8 of an egg's bulk.
Oh, wow. That's not much.
A schoolmaster could watch his students read, but he could not read.
Talk about OCD.
No, do as we tell you, not as we do.
Yes, one could not hold enough ink to write 2 letters, as this would constitute a burden.
Oh, gee.
And you can't carry a burden because that's work.
That's correct.
You also couldn't walk more than, a day's journey or something?
Well, yes.
Unless,
Okay, so if you fell asleep, where did I read it? If you fell asleep, if a man fell asleep while on a journey, and night fell on him on the Sabbath, he could move in any direction only 2,000 cubits, which is just a little over half a mile.
Because the Sabbath had started because it was night.
Yes, yes.
if you had previously buried a jug of water and some of your clothes in the ground, you could walk to that, which is a day's walk, open it up and go, okay, this is my house. Now I can walk another.
They
They had workarounds.
Yes.
Hilarious.
Now I also heard. Now I don't know if this is one of the lists of your things there, but if you could not walk a certain distance, one of the reasons why was because you might have on your sandals a tack.
Oh, yes.
Oh, you found that one? That's
Yeah.
interesting. Go ahead and read that one.
If a man on a journey and Sabbath darkness overtook him, he could establish. That's not the one it was.
That's what he was talking about.
Yes, where's the one that they couldn't wear shoes because it could consider it toiling the earth.
You're plowing the ground.
You're plowing the ground.
If you have a tack that's loose on your shoe and you're walking, you're plowing the ground.
A man could not wear nail-studded wooden shoes on the Sabbath because this would be constituted as plowing on the Sabbath.
Yeah. So anyway, all that to say, this came up during the intertestamental times between the Old and the New Testament. It says during the New Testament we see that the habit of Jesus was to observe the Sabbath as a day of worship in the synagogues. Luke 4 talks about that. But his failure to comply with the minute restrictions that the Jewish leaders insisted on brought conflict, we see. And that's again Luke 6 there. Later, Christian Jews also met on the Sabbath with non-Christian Jews to proclaim Christ as Messiah, Acts 13:14. The Christian's holy day, the day that belongs especially to the Lord Jesus, the Lord's Day, was the first day, Sunday of the week. The day of resurrection. And we see that in Matthew 28, Acts 20, 1 Corinthians 16, Revelations 1. Although some Jewish Christians probably observed the Saturday Sabbath, the early Christians saw Sunday, the Lord's Day, as a day of great joy and celebration, not a substitute necessarily to the Saturday Sabbath. Jesus warned Christians that at some point the Jews would put them out of the synagogue. And that's in John 16, he talks about that. The use of the word Sabbath to refer to Sunday, not Saturday, to Sunday. When did that happen?
1500 AD.
Yes, the Puritans, the English Puritans in 1500, about that, sometime after that area, started to do that. Evidence from the early centuries clearly show, that Christians regarded Sunday as a day to rejoice in the new life brought by Christ's resurrection. So we worship on what's considered the Lord's Day. Now, some people call it the Sabbath, and that's okay. They want to call Sunday the Sabbath. It's not a big deal. But some people get really, really wound up into the minutia of, it's not Saturday, so you are breaking the Sabbath. And I'm not going to get into that right now with those people who believe that way, but that's part of the problem the Jews had. The Jews were doing this. We see that Jesus was Lord of the Sabbath. Paul talks about it in another verse. He says that one day, one man recognizes one day, another man recognizes a different day to worship with. Let it always be done with the right spirit, basically. I'm transliteration a little bit here. And that's what matters, Paul said, not the day. And Paul was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. So, matter of fact, that's the verse right here. I'm so good at it. Didn't you see it? Romans 14, 5-9. One person regards one day above another regards every day alike. Each person must be fully convinced in their own mind. He who observes the day, that means the day of worshiping, right? Observes it for the Lord. And he who eats does it for the Lord. And he who gives thanks to God. And he who eats not, and for the Lord he does not eat and gives thanks to God. For not one of us lives for himself, and not one dies for himself. For if we live for the Lord, or if we die for the Lord. Therefore, all these things, this is summed up here, whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. For to this end Christ died and lived again, that he might be Lord both of the dead and the living. So he was talking to the Roman Christians and Jews, and then some of them were arguing, you got to follow all these rules, these Sabbath rules and all that stuff. So that's what he's talking about, eating and drinking and stuff like that. We're talking about the ceremonial part of it, and so that he was trying to deal with that. Anyway, all that to say, this was the Sabbath. So it was the Sabbath day. And remember, this is after they made all those extra rules and stuff, right? So what did the Jews think when he saw this guy carrying his rolled up mat home?
It's breaking the law.
He's breaking the law. You're in big trouble. Wait a minute, wasn't me. This man who healed me did it. So he was kind of throwing Jesus under the bus in a way. Maybe not really.
He tried, but
Yeah.
it kind of backfired, as we're about to find out.
But think about it. The Jewish leaders had total sway over whether you were in the community or not. You could be ostracized from the synagogue. If that happened, you'd probably lose whatever job you had. You wouldn't be able to buy food. You'd have to leave.
Cancel culture back then.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, you think cancel culture is bad now? It was really bad back then for these people like this. So he was really quick to try to say, wasn't me. This other man made me do it. He said to pick up it more. So they asked him, who is this man? Who told you to do this? But the man did not know. It says, did not know who it was. For
You
Jesus.
didn't even ask him his name.
No.
Sir, what is your name?
No.
You know?
I think I might have asked, but then again, I might have been so happy, I'd have been hopping and skipping and jumping. Yay!
Yeah.
I was hopeless, and now I'm not. You know, but you know, it's interesting to see how different people react to healing. The man who had the demons in him,
Oh, yeah.
remember him? He fell at the feet of Jesus. He said, "Please take me with you." And Jesus says, "No, you need to stay here in your community and talk to these people about, you know,
About what happened.
about what happened." And so, but anyway, different people did react in different ways. But this man here is kind of a little more me type of thing. Anyway, so what do we see here is legalism. Legalism being exposed. That's our second point, right? And let me see. Why did John, who wrote this gospel account, why did he mention the man's mat?
Because it would be a contentious thing.
Yeah, it was his burden. A burden he was carrying, right? He was carrying something. So, and you can't do that. We know you're not supposed to carry any burden on the Sabbath day, right? And I mean, they get down to how much wine would fit into an egg. Was that what that one
Yeah.
was? Oh, I couldn't believe that. So anyway, so Jesus' actions, though, he did show respect for the Sabbath, because what was he doing on the Sabbath? Healing. Yeah. Now, is healing a good thing to do on a Sabbath, you think?
Yes.
I would think so. And I was going to try to. There's a verse that talked about that.
That's just my thought.
Yeah, me too. Now, I'm not going to find what I'm looking for here. Oh, yeah, here it is. In Mark 2, 27 through 28, Jesus said to the Pharisees, this is after another one of these episodes, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath. And you'd know the Jews knew he was talking about himself being the Lord of the Sabbath, but he didn't say it in such a way. He said the Son of Man. He used that for a reason, because they couldn't nail him down. They couldn't take him to the court and kill him, because it was not yet his time. Anyway, in Matthew 12:8, Jesus told the Pharisees, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. He says it there too. So there's no doubt about it. If you are you in charge of something, if you're the Lord?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's your prerogative to change or do whatever you want to, right? So can he heal on the Sabbath? He's the Lord? Yes, he can. Yes, he can. And he did. Let's look at the last one here. Any questions or comments on that, by the way? So basically, he did show respect for the Sabbath, right? By this right acting. Oh, I know that. I know which verse it was. Oh, I didn't write it down. Oh, there. Oh, yes, here it is. Luke 6, 6 through 11. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching, and there was a man whose right hand was withered. Okay, it says the scribes and the Pharisees were watching Jesus closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. We've heard reports of this guy. We're going to watch him. We'll get him. Because this is funny. They did not consider him Messiah. Okay? So his work then, in their mind, was healing. When you have a talent for something, you're doing it on the Sabbath, you're doing your work, right? So they're going to get him for healing, but they didn't believe him to be Messiah. Is that irony or what?
Yeah.
Irony is precious.
Oh my goodness. So where was I in this? Okay, so see if he'd heal on the Sabbath. Then they might find a reason to accuse him because he's doing work on the Sabbath. And you know, the funny thing is they knew their scriptures. They knew this was a sign of Messiah because the Old Testament said the Messiah would do these things in Isaiah. He would do these miracles.
Yeah, but I think, purposely, their eyes were closed
Sure.
to this.
Yeah.
It was.
They made a conscious effort
Yes.
to close their eyes.
Yes, they did. And things wouldn't have turned out the way it was supposed to if they had realized.
Right. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
There was a reason they
Yes.
were allowed.
Yes.
Me personally, I believe that God allowed them to go in this direction.
Yes.
He didn't make them do it. They did it because that was their inclination.
Yes. And God used that.
And God allowed them to do it, right?
Yeah.
Just like He allowed Pharaoh to keep the children of Israel until he was ready for the
Yes.
children of Israel to leave. You know, and anyway, going on. But He knew that what they were thinking. Again, we see the omniscience of Christ here. Another godly attribute, right? All powerful, all knowing, right? He knew what they were thinking. And He said to the man with the withered hand, "Get up and come forward." And the man got up and came forward. And Jesus said to those Jews that were watching around Him, they're ready to pounce, right? He said what to them? I ask you a question. Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? To save a life or to destroy it? Here the Jews are ready. They're going to pounce, these Pharisees, the Sadducees, right? The experts, right? After looking around at them, none of them said a word. Now I'm putting this part in. They were silent. They were mute. They couldn't answer Him. Yeah, right? So then He said to him, the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and the hand was restored. Again, recreated. Right in front of those people. Right in front of them. And yet they attributed it to Satan. The Pharisees did, the Sadducees. Anyway, later on we see that. Anyway, his hands were restored, and they, the Jews themselves, were filled with rage. They seethed inside their hearts. You know how it is when you get, maybe you never been this way, when somebody's done something bad, you know they did it to get you, and you just inside, you're just, rage starts to take over. Maybe you guys are perfect. I have occasionally felt that way, right? It's not a fun feeling to go through, and I know that. But people do that, and they were filled with rage, and afterwards they discussed what they might do to Jesus. How dare He heal on the Sabbath and make us look foolish? So, anyway, those are great verses. Let's look at her. Anybody want to say anything about that before I go on?
Did we already read 9b?
We're getting, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did that.
Oh,
I think we did.
Did I just miss it?
Who read
Yes, pick up your pound. Yeah, she read it.
Okay. I just
We had such stimulating conversation that it just went out of your brain.
Yeah, I
We ought to
guess.
get on to the better points.
Yes.
Well, we only got 5 minutes, so we better do the last one here. So on this last one, these last 3 verses, I want you to notice the man's response to Jesus now. And this is verses 14 through 16 of chapter 5 in John.
All right, Joe, I'll pay attention.
Okay, Joe.
All right.
Take it away, Joe. You got it.
All eyes are on
All
you.
right. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because He was doing these things on the Sabbath.
So we see a change here also going on with these things too. And where did I read that? Oh yeah, this event at the pool, it talks about this on our lesson book on page 71. And a subsequent run-in with the Jews marked a shift in how John reported the miracles or signs of the gospel. The earlier signs were for the benefit of the recipient. But this healing, this was a brand new type of thing. It was therefore served as a theme in his gospel. The miracles of Jesus became a point of contention for the religious leaders. And rather than rejoicing, these people should have. Here's this man who's been invalid for all these years. Shouldn't they be rejoicing that he was able to now be healed and come to the temple and be a good participant in society and everything? They should have, right?
He
Oh,
was
no.
usurping their power.
Oh no, Bethlehem man.
And ultimately seeking the death of Jesus. Anyway, so on these last verses that you read, it's interesting to see. What was Jesus' action in this first verse, verse 14? What was his action? Think about what action did he do?
He said, "You become well." We're referring to the ones that I just read.
In verse 14, yeah, the first half of verse 14.
Do not sin. Well, is he implying that he became this way because of sin?
Well,
He said, do not sin anymore.
Look at the first half. Afterward,
See, you are well again.
Jesus did what?
Found him, looked him for
Found
Look
him.
at what looking for him specifically.
What does that mean?
looking for
Yeah,
him.
that's what I was getting at. When you see these words, and afterwards Jesus found him, what was he doing? Look, I think Steve said,
Actively looking.
he was
for him.
looking for this man. He knew where he could find him, of course. But he was looking for this man. He was searching him out. Now that is an interesting thing. Does God search us out all the time, doesn't he? Yeah. It says in the scriptures that no person can come to the Father can come to me unless the Father draws him. In other words, brings him in. So this person here, Jesus, was looking for him. And he was looking for him in the temple. Why was he in the temple?
Because now he could go to the
Now
temple.
he could go to the temple. But he also had to present himself in the temple, by the way,
Yeah.
for the priest to see that he was no longer an invalid, no longer
Right,
had that
lame.
that lameness. Yes. So that was part of the process, probably why he was there. But that's the first place I'd go. If I'd go, thank you God, thank you God, thank you God, all day long. It says, "Behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." Now, this is an interesting thing. Why would Jesus say this to this man, do you think? Don't sin anymore.
He was talking in eternal
Ah.
judgment.
Yeah.
Least something worse happens to you. That's the eternal judgment
Mm-hmm.
that I think he was talking about.
And I don't want to belabor the point too much, but the Jews believed that if you did something wrong in your life, then you would be cursed with a malady of some sort, a sickness, or something bad would happen to you. Now, do bad things happen because we do bad things? Yes, they do. But not just because of them. Sometimes bad things happen just because bad things happen. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. We know that, right? And so that's not necessarily, but they taught that was the what was going on. And there's verses that talk about things like that. The Lord promised blessings to those who obeyed His commands and curses on those who disobeyed. So people would interpret that to mean if you disobeyed, you sinned. That's why you've got that problem in your life. So, you know who Joni Erickson is?
Yes.
Yeah, she's a paraplegic, I think.
Yeah.
People have said to her, "You need to confess your sin." That's why you have this. What is wrong with people? I mean, the Pharisees weren't back in the first century. They're here today.
Yeah.
It's a sad thing. But there is a connection. We know that. Interesting story is Job. Job
Oh yeah.
went through all kinds of things as a point of testing for him. And they kept saying to him, "You sin, Job. Confess your sin, and then you'll be okay." He says,
I did not sin.
I didn't do this grievous sin that people are saying I must have done. Now, does that mean he was sinless? No. But he didn't do it like he didn't steal from his neighbor or whatever it might be. He didn't do those kind of things apparently. He was adamant about it. Okay? So we see that that's the situation. So when Jesus said stop sinning, he's referring to something, and something worse will happen. He's referring to what? And I think somebody already said it. His eternal judgment. If you don't change your spiritual life, something worse could happen to you. Okay? And I'm the Messiah, and I'm telling you this, so you won't mess up, because I helped you with this basically, and now I'm helping you with your spiritual life as well. So something worse that can happen. So something worse likely did not refer to an even more debilitating physical problem. Instead, Jesus is referring to the man suffering eternal judgment. Jesus cares about our souls, doesn't he? He cares about us in our life. And this shows that he cared even about this man who had this terrible malady that probably a priest or a Levite would never touch. A Pharisee, Sadducee, you stay back from me. I'll be unclean. And Jesus went to him and healed him. What a neat thing to see, huh?
Yes.
So, but we also see that with this actual thing here, that Jesus has been exposed, essentially. And remember, they were looking to kill him. We talked about that, right? In other verses. And this is where it kind of begins in John. John's talking about this. And it says, "For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus." At this point, things changed, John's saying. Because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. How dare you heal on the Sabbath? If you just think of that word, those words. How could you think that was a bad thing? I don't know. Their eyes are blind. Somebody mentioned that before. They had blinders on. They could not see the fact that they had the Messiah in front of them. God in the flesh. And that was the problem. Anyway, so any comments or questions about these things we talked about today? And those of you online, by the way, if you log on to YouTube, you can make a comment and I'll try to respond to it. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Pretty interesting verses?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's great when I studied this. I couldn't get enough of it. It's just one of these kind of things. And I ran out of time because I kept, look at this over here. Look at this over here, But the man's actions in these verses is interesting, you know, because he went away and he told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. So he was not afraid of the Jews at that point. He was willing to say, hey, it was Jesus who healed me. Now, that was probably not a good thing for Jesus in a way, because of that
Oh,
point
Jesus
there.
knew he'd do it.
But Jesus knew he was going to say it. But Jesus knew this was all part of what was going to happen, and he knew that. So, 3 points to our thing today. First one is that Christians are to offer compassion to all people. Did Jesus do that? If Jesus did that, should we do that? Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes it's hard. It's not easy to do. Christians can affirm. Number 2, Christians can affirm Jesus working in the lives of all people. And that's as well true. And the third point is Christians can celebrate the works of Jesus. You know, you can rejoice in what Jesus has done. You know, we've all, as Christians, been healed by Jesus spiritually, haven't we? Yes, we have. And that's a miracle in itself. When you see somebody, and I've seen people that know that person that person will never become a Christian. That person's too bad. You know, done too many things, or whatever. And that person becomes a Christian. And you realize you just saw a miracle in that person's heart being changed from stone to a heart again.
Very judgmental.
Yeah. Anyway, so our key doctrine is the Christians and social order that we should work to provide for the orphan, the needy, the abused, the aged, the helpless, and the sick. Jesus did that, right? Paul talks about that. James talks about that. James 1:27. I was going to read through that, but we're not going to have time. We need to follow Christ's example to minister to people, both physically and spiritually. We can't leave out either of them. You know, we need to bring that cup of cold water to that person thirsting, and then help them with their spiritual thirst as well. So let's have a word of prayer. Dear Father, thank you so much for these words from John chapter 5, Lord. Lord, help prepare our hearts, Lord, to minister to those people that you have already set up for us to meet, Lord. Those divine appointments, just like this man at the pool that Jesus knew was there. That was an appointment, Lord. And just help us with those things as well. Thank you for the compassion you had on our hearts, Lord. The compassion that while we were yet sinners, you sent Christ for us. Thank you so much. I just pray that you give us those opportunities to show others the same kind of compassion, Lord. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for being with us online. I'm hopeful you were able to watch us without any problems this week. Again, I apologize for last week. This is Grace Baptist Church, the Adult One Bible Study. My name is Norm Ellis, and we hope to see you again next week. And thank you guys for your good discussion, and I sure appreciate it. Made the lesson go well.
It was very good.
Very good. Thank
It
you very
was
much.
a total coincidence that we were talking about compassion today, and there's quite a bit of food upstairs for the
Oh, really?
food bank.
Great.
For the
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Do you just take food all the time or just at certain times? or-
You know, as the women's group started to kind of take it on, and then we kind of faltered. But yeah, I take food all the time.
Oh, so I can bring some next Sunday?
Yes,
You
yes.
just prefer the cans and the
Oh.
boxes of things? or-
What would they have? Did you see the list?
No.
There's a list that's out there. Individual servings. If you
Oh.
do like cereals, they have those individual cups.
Right.
Because the kids come to the food bank and
Oh,
then
okay.
they
Factory
take
sealed.
what they need.
Factory sealed items. Yes.
Right. Okay.
You know, if you
No
granola
expired.
bars or
Oh, okay.
you know, that's individual. They have individual cups for macaroni and cheese.
Right. Oh, okay.
Right, that you can just add hot water to. The
Right.
kids eat a lot of macaroni and cheese.
Okay.
So
That's
so there's a list. Do you want me to?
Yeah.